It is now 7 p.m. Are we good with the recording? Okay. And I am reconvening to open session and calling to order the regular Board of Education meeting for Indian Prairie School District 204 on Monday, July 17, 2023. Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Donahue?
Here.
Ms. Gintz?
Here.
Mr. Karubas?
Here.
Ms. Fosdick?
Here.
And Ms. Jane?
Here.
Mr. Karubas, will you lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next regular board meeting will be held on Monday, August 7th. We have 9 board salutes today, quite a few. So, Mr. Karubas, you can start.
I have 2. District 204 Director of Student Services appointed to Statewide Advisory Council. The board salutes District 204 Director of Student Services, Dr. Kimberly Miller, on her appointment by Governor J.B. Pritzker as a member of the State of Illinois Education of Children with Disabilities Advisory Council. Congratulations, Dr. Miller, on this stellar achievement. College-sponsored National Merit Scholarship winners. The board salutes 4 Neuqua Valley High School seniors who were recently awarded 2023 National Merit Scholarships financed by U.S. colleges and universities. The scholarship winners are Emily Hugh, Natalia Goker, Samuel Kogar, and Riona O'Grady. Officials of each sponsor college selected their scholarship winners from among the finalists in the 2023 National Merit Scholarship Program who plan to attend their institutions. These awards provide between $500 and $2,000 annually for up to 4 years of undergraduate study at the institution financing the scholarship. We congratulate all of our National Merit Scholarship winners.
Ms. Gentz.
All right, I do have 3. District 204 students participate at the National E-Cyber Mission Competition. The board salutes Still Middle School 8th grade students Kanak Purik, Samvi Thamaneni, and Kartika Palani on Team Remote Reality for making it to the national level for the North Central region of the E-Cyber Mission Competition in Washington, D.C. The team identified ways in which remote learning can be more effective in the future and to minimize its negative impacts. Congratulations on a job well done. 2023 Illinois School Counselor Association Impact Award winner. The board salutes Waubonsie Valley Guidance Counselor Matt Walker, who was selected as the 2023 Illinois School Counselor Association's Rising Star Award winner. This recognition is given to a promising first or second year school counselor who has made an impact on their department, school, or the profession of school counseling. Matt will be formally recognized at the Illinois School Counselor Association Annual Conference this fall. Congratulations, Matt. And last but not least, 2023 NSPRA Golden Achievement Award. The board salutes Indian Prairie School District 204 for earning a 2023 Golden Achievement Award from the National School Public Relations Association for the district's first ever strategic plan entitled Inspire, Innovate, and Empower the Future. This award recognizes outstanding strategic work in all aspects of school public relations, communication, marketing, and engagement. Congratulations on this stellar achievement.
Ms. Fosdick.
I have 2. Illinois Principal Association Student Awards. The board salutes Brookdale Elementary 5th grade students Aria Janes and Giancarlos Resendiz, who were recently honored at the DuPage region of the Illinois Principal Association Student Recognition Breakfast. Recognized for making positive contributions to their schools, the students were selected by their principal for having a positive attitude towards classmates and possessing strength of character and the courage to do what is right. We congratulate these students and celebrate their success. And District 204 middle school student performed at Carnegie Hall in New York City. The board salutes Metea Valley rising freshman Samhita Kamatala, who performed at Carnegie Hall in New York City in mid-June. Samhita, who plays the oboe, was selected to be part of the Middle School Honors Junior Band, selected to perform as part of the 2023 Middle School Honors Performance Series. Members were chosen based on talent and achievements demonstrated in the application and audition recording. Congratulations, Samhita, on a job well done.
Ms. Jane.
2022-2023 Metra Safety Poster and Essay Contest winners. The board salutes Brookdale Kindergarten student Rajat Thakur and STEC 4th grade student Karim Yusenov for winning first place in their grade category for the 16th annual Metra Safety Poster and Essay Contest. As part of the contest, the students had to take on an advocacy role and communicate the importance of safety near the tracks. The year's theme is Stay Safe, Stay Off Train Tracks. Each winning student was awarded a $500 gift card. Well done, Rajat and Karim. District 204 students placed first at the National E-Cyber Mission competition. The board salutes the Metea Valley High School 9th grade students Nidhi Sagaram, Samil Sharma, Biraj Vyas on Team Eureka for placing first in the 9th grade National E-Cyber Mission competition in Washington, D.C. The team developed a preventative solution for hyperuricemia using plants with antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and diuretic properties. The judges stated that the team presented a well-scoped and researched problem. The number of trials was impressive and the presentation of the data was clear. The team's use of the scientific practices and the ability to communicate demonstrated their knowledge of what they learned. Congratulations on your well-deserved success.
So that was a great variety of staff, our own strategic plan, arts and science recognition of the district. I am thrilled to see that variety and accomplishments. So let's give them all an applause. We have no public comment tonight? Okay. So we will move to our consent agenda and superintendent report. We will start with the superintendent report. Dr. Talley.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue, members of the board and the Indian Prairie community. I want to start off with my comments sharing some information about upcoming event. This will be Team IPEF's 10th year as a charity partner in the Naperville Healthy Driven Half Marathon and 5K race in October. Since 2014, Team IPF has had over 2,000 participants who have raised over $1 million for our students. All members of the board have participated in this in the past. Whether you run or walk fast or walk slowly, it doesn't matter. The fact is that we are supporting IPEF. I just want to celebrate two businesses that are supporting us at the silver level for student and at the gold level Aramark in their sponsorship of this. Without their support and others, we would not be able to have this event take place. So we'll see everybody in October. A lot has been happening in our schools over the past 5 weeks since school let out. I just want to name a few of those items. 9 new principals have started in their roles. We have 5 new assistant principals who have been hired serving in our middle and high schools. The elementary Freedom School camp was held at Collishaw with more than 80 students involved. We had our first of our 2 one-week STEM camps. A number of capital projects are happening this summer. We are spending approximately $15 million on these projects. Some of these items include the following: paving at Neuqua Valley and new sidewalks, new playgrounds at some of our schools to include Owen, Patterson, Springbrook, and Longwood, just to name a few. New flooring at some of our schools to include Prairie Preschool, Brookdale, and Gombert, just to name a few. Brookdale was just finished, I just learned that today, I believe, and they're back in their building. New gym floors at a few of our schools to include Steck, May Watts, and Fry as examples. Paving at a number of our schools, including Still, Gregory, Crone, McCarty, and Georgetown. I want to thank Mr. John Robinson, our Director of Building and Grounds, and his team, Ken Swallow and Richard Sear, for their hard work in this overseeing this work and making sure it's done on time. Our students and staff and families will be amazed at how this work will help create more inviting spaces in our schools. And before I turn the meeting back to Ms. Donahue, I would like to request that the Board of Ed approve the appointment of Ms. Sherry Fredericks to be the permanent principal of May Watts Elementary School. She has been in the acting role since July 1. Ms. Fredericks was formerly the assistant principal at Granger Middle School. She has worked in several of our middle schools where she taught science, social studies, and Project Arrow, and also was a student support specialist at one of our elementary schools. And I would also like the Board of Ed to approve the appointment of Mr. Daniel Smith to be the Director of Student Services, where he has been in an acting role since July 1. Mr. Smith comes to us from the School of Expressive Arts and Learning, where he held several positions, including Education Supervisor, Education Coordinator, and Lead Teacher. I'll now turn it back to you, Ms. Donahue.
Okay, I need a motion to approve Sherry Fredericks as principal at McCarty Elementary as presented.
I move that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Sherry Fredericks as principal at McCarty Elementary School as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? Okay, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
and Ms. Gins.
Yes.
The motion passes. Congratulations. So Sherry, who do you have here with you? Sherry, who did you bring today?
This is Ryan. He will be a junior at U of I. His twin brother Luke will be a junior at Iowa State in the fall. And my husband Marcus, who has also worked for 204. He's at Scala Middle School.
Oh,
Wow.
nice. Oh, I need a motion to approve Dan Smith as Director of Student Services as presented.
I move to approve Dan Smith as Director of Student Services as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? Okay, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Gins,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
and Ms. Fosdick.
Yes.
The motion passes. Another congratulations. So Dan, did you bring anyone?
I did not.
Okay.
I'm equally as honored and happy.
Congratulations to both of our new appointments. All right. Next, we move to our consent agenda. I need a motion to approve consent agenda items F through Q.
I move that the Board of Education approve consent agenda items F through Q as presented.
A second?
Any discussion? Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Gins,
Yes.
and Ms. Jane.
Yes.
The motion passes. Next, we move to our action items. I need a motion and a second to approve the high school math, AP, calculus textbooks, and digital resources for use beginning in the 2023-2024 school year.
I move that the Board of Education approve the high school math, AP calculus textbooks and digital resources for use beginning in the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Gins,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
and Ms. Fosdick.
Yes.
All right, moving right along here. I need a motion and a second to approve the high school math calculus textbooks and digital resources for use beginning in the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
I move that the board approve the high school math calculus textbooks and digital resources for use beginning in the 2023-24 school year as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? Yeah, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Mr. Carubus,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
and Ms. Skins.
Yes.
The motion passes. I need a motion and a second to approve the Board of Education triple I conference expense pre-approval as presented.
I move that the Board of Education approve the III conference expense pre-approval as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
I do want to make it clear that we already approved expenses for these individuals, and we aren't approving additional expenses for these approvals, except that they are getting some additional education, signed up for additional courses, and so we got to go through the pre-approval process again. So it's not duplicative, it's kind of an amended pre-approval.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Carubus,
Yes.
Ms. Skins,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
and Ms. Jane.
Yes.
Motion passes. I need a motion and a second to approve the equity plan that will go into effect for the next 4 years, starting with the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
I move that the Board of Education approve the equity plan that will go into effect for the next 4 years, starting with the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? Okay, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Mr. Carubus,
Yes.
Ms. Skins,
Yes.
and Ms. Donahue.
Yes. Motion passes. That one was presented last time and is a culmination of a lot of effort and activity, so I would really appreciate that. Not that the other ones weren't, but all of them were a lot of work, but that one in particular has been a big effort. All right, we will now have a presentation from Matt Shipley regarding the 2023-2024 tentative budget, and I'm sure you're happy you're on early in the evening compared to some of the ones we've got.
I don't know what to do with myself at 17. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. As President Donnie mentioned, this evening we're going to present our 2023-2024 tentative budget. Tonight's budget is in line with Strategic Plan Priority Number 4 and Board Policy 4-10. This is actually the third opportunity I've had to talk about our budget and long-range forecast with the board. So tonight's presentation will start with a summary of our prior discussions in February and May. Before we start looking at some of the numbers or spreadsheets, I do want to take an opportunity to highlight some of the key priority areas we had as we worked through the budget process this spring and summer. I'll then show our tentative operating budget and our tentative non-operating budget. Those are both going to be high-level summaries, but the full data, which is about a 50-page Excel document required by the State Board of Education, is also available with tonight's meeting and will be posted online as well. And then finally, we'll look at some comparable district benchmarking, how our district compares with our 8 comparable districts, and I will close just with a quick summary, and then going through the final steps we will need from the board to formally adopt this budget. So as mentioned, we talked in both February and May about some high-level points that were really driving our budget process and our long-range financial position for the district. Really the first, or the headlining discussion we really had back in February was talking about the inflationary pressures the district saw really across all expense categories over the past year. I think if you followed the news, there's some thought that the inflation is finally starting to come down and come under control. However, it will impact both our budget for next year, the 23-24, as well as impacted the year we're kind of wrapping up now. I do want to point out we tend to be a lagging indicator when it comes to CPI, mainly because our property tax levy is tied to a year in arrears with the CPI. So we've made a conscious decision to tie a lot of our contracts to the CPI, kind of a year, give ourselves kind of an extra year. So what that means is while we maybe didn't see some of the immediate pressures other businesses did, we'll see the inflationary pressures work through some of our vendor contracts and our labor agreements a little bit longer than maybe some you'll hear through headlines too. So even though inflation's starting to go down a little bit in the economy, it's continuing to have a significant impact on us. 23-24 will be the final full year that we have federal ESSER funds available. We've had several other discussions with the board on those ESSER funds, and we'll be updating the board, I believe, at a meeting in the future too about our plans for that final year of ESSER funding. We talked about the district's property tax rate and how the rate that is charged to taxpayers has generally been stable over the past couple years. That's really a sign that property values and our local housing market continues to be strong and is at least keeping up with the consumer price index. We spent a lot of time in May talking about some of the challenges associated with state funding, and that even though the state has continued to increase its funding of the new evidence-based funding formula, only a very small portion of that funding has found its way to Indian Prairie, and we did have, I think, some good discussions on what that means for the district and also what we as a district need to do, being a little bit more proactive with our legislators and with some of our advocacy organizations. And then finally, we've talked at both meetings about one of the long-term challenges we have at the district, and that's going to be to continue funding our capital projects at the level we've done over the last couple of years. So I know Dr. Talley listed off a laundry list of really exciting projects. We hope to continue to fund those projects for the next budget year, the budget that we're presenting tonight. But we do have about about 3 years left of that funding before we have to really address what the long-term funding for our capital projects will be. So I have just a couple updates to update the board on that have occurred since we talked in May. These are both sort of good news as we sort of built the final tentative budget that we're presenting tonight. So the first is that we are seeing an increase in Title I funding for next school year. So we've talked several times with the board about how both the ESSER funding and Title I funding is tied to federal census data, and how we felt that data really hasn't been representative of our district and what we see in our buildings. So we are fortunate that data is starting to catch up a little bit with what we see in our student population. So we are projecting an $800,000 increase. That is based on on a federal allocation. So that's a known increase as of today. That almost doubles our Title I funding for next year, up to a total of $1.7 million. Again, that's amount that had sort of gradually decreased over the past several years, and now all of a sudden we were kind of bumped back up to a level we were at maybe 4 or 5 years ago. The second update is that we have seen a favorable interest rate environment. We were able to invest our first property tax installment that we received last month at some very favorable rates. So we're increasing our investment income up to $7 million total. That's a $3 million increase from what we presented in May. Again, this is likely a temporary or one-time revenue source. So we're being very conscious and conscientious about how we use those funds, making sure that we're not making any long-term investments that we will not be able to fund in the future if there's a potential decrease in interest rates going forward. So we obviously, two pieces of good news, and we were able to tie these revenues directly with some of the priorities that are laid out in our strategic plan and that we'll cover here next. Our first budget priority, this is really tied directly with the strategic plan priority 4. The expectations of our community is that we present a balanced and sustainable budget each year, and I'm happy to report that tonight's budget is a balanced budget. It is sustainable. It does maintain sufficient operating fund balance or reserves so that the district will have adequate cash flow throughout the year. And we are projected to receive the recognition status from ISB, the State Board of Education. That is the highest status they award. Just want to highlight that tonight is really one step in what's been a transparent and accountable process. Our budget process culminates next month with an annual budget hearing. But as part of that, the budget will be posted online and available for 30 days, and so that's at least 30 days, excuse me, and that's available both as part of tonight's board packet as well as on the business office section of our website. We have been compliant with the truth and taxation requirements that are required when we pass our property tax levy each year. That's another public hearing and another 21-day posting process that we comply with each year. The district is subject to various financial and compliance requirements, and I'm proud to report that we pass those with flying colors. And we're also current with all required regulatory filings, whether that's filings with the State Board of Education, filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission that are required as part of our documents, and really there's, again, a laundry list of requirements that we're in compliance with when it comes to our financial reporting. Second priority I do want to discuss tonight is that we have increased staffing for next year, and we've used this in a real targeted way, again, trying to make sure that we're making sustainable investments that aren't going to be subject to a 1 or 2 year funding cliff where we would have to look at potentially reversing those increases. So for the most part, these are sustainable increases in full-time equivalents for 23-24. The funding has primarily been that additional Title I funding I mentioned. We do have some other grants that are funding some of these positions for next year, and we have made some additional local revenues available to fund these positions as well. Again, our focus has really been targeted needs with this, with these 19 positions. So that has included positions at all 4 of our Title I elementary schools, as well as some additional funding at Fisher Middle School, which is our middle school with the highest low income percentage. So almost about half of these 19 positions are going to those 5 schools. Again, a real targeted investment that we made as an administrative group. We've increased a couple early childhood positions. We saw a decrease in our early childhood enrollment as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We started to see that enrollment rebound and actually start to reach above levels we reached in fiscal year 18, fiscal year 19 before the pandemic. So we are increasing the funding associated with that program. And then we do have additional engagement and student support specialists really focused on our migrant and EL populations. Again, a population we saw significant growth over the past year. Third budget priority is really to support our strategic plan priority 1, objective 2, which called to review the curriculum through a lens of student achievement, equity, and engagement, and adjust the curriculum accordingly. So the board received a presentation and discussion in December of 2022 from our deputy superintendent, really about the challenges and the significant needs we have in the curriculum area. We have some real deferred reviews, deferred needs for various resources, and so this was an area where we wanted to consciously invest in our curriculum for next year and going forward. I know the board's received several presentations over the past couple months on various high school curriculums. Some of that is coming out of this budget tonight, but the largest part is a $3.1 million investment in new literacy curriculum at the elementary level. Again, this is going to allow us to really adopt that curriculum in a one-time shot, adopt it with fidelity, and adopt it it's sort of at the full level that is intended by the program as and as it's designed. And this paired really well with some of those increased investment revenues we talked about earlier. So this is a one-time need that we were able to fund with one-time funding source. And then we were also able to accelerate the adoption of our STEM SAM labs. So as the board remembers, we made a commitment to having STEM programs in all 21 of our elementary schools. We originally had planned that kind of to be a 3-year implementation with about 7 schools each year. This first year was so successful that we saw the need to accelerate that. We saw the want to accelerate that, and we're able to now fund that STEM program in all 21 of our elementary schools, starting with the 23-24 school year. Final budget priority. You've heard Dr. Talley talk about this already tonight, and before I'm going to talk, I do have a short video to let one of our buildings talk about the capital work that they're seeing this summer as well. And
It's an exciting time in Neuqua Valley as several large projects are underway to improve safety and access to campus. First up is the main circle at the main building. Almost all sidewalks leading to the building entry and the entire circle drive are being replaced, including concrete, asphalt, and curbing. In addition, both bus entries in the back of the school are getting new concrete sidewalks. Both projects will continue throughout the month of July. At BFC, front asphalt roofing is being replaced with longer-lasting steel panels. The main entrances of both buildings remain accessible. Watch for another update at the end of July.
So I wanted to show that for a couple reasons. First, Principal Fuhrer down at Neuqua is probably the most excited person I've ever seen regarding asphalt and concrete. So he has been thrilled with this project and very excited. But I really do think this project talks to several of the priorities that we have listed here. So we are addressing a significant deferred maintenance need at Neuqua Valley with this project. Neuqua is now 26 years old, and this is for the most part original cement work that's sort of been patched as needed and really was well past its useful life. This speaks to the need regarding life safety and security for all our students. So really increasing the accessibility of that whole campus as a result of this project. I will give some credit to our Director of Operations, John Robinson, who's gone above and beyond and tore his Achilles this weekend. So he'll be one of the first people who gets to experience some of the ADA accessibility here. He'll be, on crutches and scooters here for the next several months. So he really kind of putting his money where his mouth is when it comes to some of this building improvement work. Just wanted to talk through, we are funding these projects primarily out of our non-operating capital projects fund, but we have made operating funds available as well as grant funds. And really we're trying to focus on making our projects as compelling and collaborative as possible, both to gain support within the community, but then also to potentially make some of these projects compelling from a grant perspective as well. The picture I have here, I'll just talk through this quickly. This is outside Springbrook Elementary, looking at one of our playground projects. That is a project where we're replacing 9 elementary school playgrounds this year, funded through a grant obtained through Representative Yang Rohr's office. So she's pictured in the work here. And I think, again, to speak through, we have the building principal involved. We've had a collaborative process with the buildings being able to send out surveys to parents and students asking what they want to see as part of those playground work. We engaged a great architecture firm, Upland Design, who's designed unique playgrounds for each school that speaks to the school colors and incorporates a lot of that school culture right into the playground. Also put together sort of a long-term plan for each of those facilities for those outside spaces so that, again, if there are grant opportunities in the future to further expand on this work, we'll sort of have designs and ideas already ready to go that have been vetted with both from an architecture and design side, but also with our community too. So I hope as we continue to work through our master facility plan and some of the additional discussions we're going to have in the future about capital projects, I hope you continue to see a collaborative approach coming from our team. So with that said, I do just want to queue up 2 future discussions we have designated for capital. The first is at the September 11th board meeting. We will present a full review of this summer's projects as well as what we are planning for the summer 2024 projects, which again will be funded with this budget this evening. And then sort of the big discussion will be at a November 6th meeting where we anticipate presenting our 10-year master facility plan. That's work that started in January, and we've been working with a team of architects as well as representatives from all our school communities to really build out a long-term master facility plan for the district. So as promised, I would show a spreadsheet with some numbers this evening. So this is the tentative budget for our operating funds. We have 6 operating funds for the district, but by far the largest of our operating funds is our education fund. We have some flexibility in how we allocate certain revenue sources, such as property taxes, to the different funds. So we, kind of leading up to this meeting, we tend to combine these into sort of one presentation. So this may be the first time we're presenting all funds individually. But I'll just focus quickly on the total column and going down to where we look at fund balance as a percentage of revenues. That's sort of the percentage that speaks to the adequacy of our reserves or the equity that we carry forward each year. So we are projected to end the 23-24 school year with a fund balance as a percent of revenues of 35.7%. That's relatively in line with where the district's been over the past several years. That is sufficient to meet that recognition status that I mentioned earlier. And it does leave us significant reserves to manage cash flow and have funds available throughout the school year. We've talked in the past about one of the challenges of having close to 80% of our revenues come from property taxes is that we only receive property taxes twice a year. So that fund balance percentage has to stay, again, at least 25%, but we've been a little bit higher just to deal with some of the cash flow and liquidity issues that come with property taxes just being our overwhelming revenue source. Here, just showing sort of in a quick pie chart how our revenue breaks down. As mentioned, property tax is our largest revenue source, budgeted at 76% for this next school year. Again, all of this is relatively consistent with prior years. We did talk in May about that state funding percentage and how we really see that start to dip about 0.5% each year, even as the state's invested more money in that evidence-based funding formula. Again, just to summarize what we talked about in May, the state is putting in about $350 million each year into that formula. Again, given the recent inflationary environment, that's not been sufficient to keep up with inflation. And then that money really has been targeted at Tier 1 districts, districts that have a funding percentage below what our funding percentage is as a Tier 2. Just moving on to expenditures, again, relatively consistent allocation from prior years with salaries and employee benefits making up over 3/4 of our expenditures. The purchase services of 14% includes our major outsourced contractual relationships as well. So again, those are primarily funds that ultimately get passed on to contractual service employees who are working directly with our students, either as bus drivers, custodians, or food service employees. Tonight's budget does reflect all union agreements, employee contracts, significant contracts, and other known obligations. So we have been diligent and been able to update the budget for all known expenditures at this time, as well as projections for other cost increases. This does mean that we're increasing budgets across all schools and departments, again, to address our rising costs and to continue to support the budget priorities we just talked about. Moving on to our two non-operating funds, which are our bond and interest fund and our capital projects fund. We've no changes in tonight's budget from what we presented at either the February or May meeting. So again, I do want to just reiterate, we have a real long-term opportunity with our declining bond payments. You'll see that from the 23 to 24 budget, we're declining by about $500,000 in bond payments. And we'll continue to see about a $500,000 to $1 million decrease over the next couple years, with fiscal year 27 being the final year that we are paying off bond and interest payments, and then we will have no outstanding bonds. On the flip side, we do have a long-term challenge with funding our facility and capital needs. Again, we've made a significant investment in 2023 and plan to again in 2024. But we have about 1 to 2 years left after that in that non-operating capital projects fund before we'll have to find another funding source for our significant capital needs. So finally this evening, just to close, looking at some of our comparable district analysis and expense per pupil. This is data that we present every year and kind of are pretty consistent in how we present it. So again, in May, we looked at kind of a different set of comparable districts when we looked at the evidence-based funding formula. This is sort of back to our traditional comparable districts, which are really 8 unit districts that are some of the highest performing unit districts in the state. And generally, they're in our area as well. This includes Naperville, Wheaton, and Elmhurst in DuPage County, as well as Geneva, Batavia, St. Charles, which are in Kane County, and then Barrington, 220 as well. Again, very consistent with prior years. Indian Prairie 204 is the lowest expense per pupil of our 8 comparable districts, and we are the only district below the state average. And you can see it's a pretty significant gap between both us and the next highest or next lowest, excuse me, district in Wheaton 200, with that difference of over $2,000 in expense per pupil. And you can see our comparable districts do range all the way up to Barrington, which is spending over $20,000 per pupil. This piece of data, we've presented this data in the past for our 8 comparable districts, but not in this form. This is a scatter plot. And this comes out of a question that Board Member Rising asked at the May meeting about that relationship between EAV, or property wealth, that a district has per pupil, and the overall tax rate that that district has that's levied against its residents. So again, we've presented in the past our EAV per pupil compared to these districts, and again, we have the lowest EAV per pupil. So that's the x-axis, and you can see we're the first district, or the furthest to the left of the 8 districts. We're the only district that has an EAV per pupil below $250,000. We've also presented tax rates, again, for these 8 districts, and that's the y-axis. And again, we're kind of in the middle. We're the 4th out of 8 in tax rates, but I think the sort of interesting takeaway when you look kind of at a global perspective at these 8 districts is there's really only a small correlation between that EAV per pupil and tax rate. So if you move into that kind of $250,000 to $300,000 bracket, you'll see there's 2 districts there. One has a tax rate well above ours, over 6, and one actually has a tax rate slightly lower than ours. Then you go to 3 to 350,000, it's the same thing. There's 3 districts with one about 6, and 2 are actually below 5. So, this really speaks to, just sort of the inconsistencies and inequities across the state, and how different districts have, just over time, how the PTEL formula has been applied, how different districts have maybe had to go out for referendum or gone to local taxpayers for other needs. How we really see a wide distribution in both tax rates and property wealth across districts, and there's not necessarily a real true or linear correlation between those two data points. So again, wanted to share this. This was a question that Board Member Rising asked if we'd done this analysis. So here it is. I did look at this for all unit districts in the state as well. Obviously, there's a lot more dots. It's a little bit more cluttered, but it's kind of a similar story as far as the relationship, that there's a very weak correlation between that EAV per pupil and that tax rate. Finally, I did promise we would go through the final steps for budget adoption. The budget is posted again as part of this board meeting's agenda tonight. It'll also be posted at the ipsd.org/business office page. We are required to post it for 30 days prior to adoption, so we will meet that requirement, and it is posted in the form that's legally required by the Illinois School Code. At the August 21st Board of Education meeting, we will hold a public hearing at the start of the meeting, and then at the conclusion of that public hearing during the regular board meeting, I will ask the board to formally adopt this budget. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Ms. Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. I will move to the first presentation, slide number 4. Oops. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button here. Okay, yeah, here we go. So, really happy to see this increase in funding towards being strategically used to support specific needs. Will these positions that we have, these full-time positions that we are creating, are these seen as ongoing positions or just for this coming year?
Yeah, our hope is that a majority will be ongoing. So again, the real challenge with us for the 24-25 school year is going to be that the completion of those ESSER funds as well. So we've been conscious of that, and at this time, I'd say we're planning on sort of a flat FTE for next year. We do have a 5-year forecast that supports a flat FTE for next year. So at this time, we're optimistic that these positions will be ongoing.
Great. Slide number 6. That's the one that I just spoke to. Oh yeah, from slide 4, what I meant to ask, I'm sorry, apparently I'm not very good with PowerPoint today. So the Title I funding, the increase of 800,000, do we foresee that being like a consistent, will the numbers play out for subsequent years because it's
Yeah.
based on the census data?
Yeah, we're hopeful it should. And again, we've talked about this, and really with the ESSER funding also being tied to this poverty account, it really brought some of these issues to light. But we're confident that we're confident that we're getting closer to the true data and the data that's reflected in our schools. So we are confident, optimistic, not quite sure the right word, but we do believe that we'll stay at this funding level, and that the numbers are closer than they were a year or two ago when we were talking about some of the challenges we had with declining title funds and with ESSER funds.
Yeah.
I would say cautiously optimistic is the
Yes.
term I would use. But the funding that we're going to get for this year coming up is more similar to what we had before the pandemic. I'm going to go back to maybe 2017. And so it is hopeful. I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to jinx anything.
But were our numbers a lot different back then from the way the numbers played out right now in our census data?
Yeah,
or-
the challenge is that the Title I funding is distributed based on U.S. Census data, and it's specifically the poverty count.
Right.
When we look to support students, we support based on the free reduced lunch calculation, which is a little different. So there should be some correlation, but that's where we've seen the poverty number kind of stay flat as our low income number increased, or the poverty number decreased as the low income number was flat. So this is bringing those numbers a little bit more, that relationship a little bit more in line. Again, if we feel confident in our number, right? So we felt that we've been shortchanged in the past, but it is really a kind of a completely different data set. And again, it's U.S. Census data. It's not necessarily reflecting who attends our schools. It's the whole population of the district boundaries. So there are some sort of variances. It's one of those things where I think if anybody could, I think everybody would acknowledge there's some flaws in this system and how we're allocating these funds, but it is federal funds, so they're looking. That's the tool they have, is the U.S. Census data, and that's what's been used historically.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah, but like I said, cautiously optimistic is probably
optimistic is the
probably
right-
the
okay.
best words. And again, when we did see it kind of decrease in the past, it was gradual. So I wouldn't, if we do see it, I would expect if we do start seeing it decrease, it would again kind of step down over several years.
No, thank you. The STEM SAM labs, I had the opportunity to actually visit Steck Elementary and visit Miss Batchelder's room and meet with our STEM specialists, Liz Kaleda, and I can't tell you how thrilled the students were using the SAM labs. I was excited using the SAM labs, and I was well informed by the third graders how to use it and what to do. And so us accelerating the adoption of this is really exciting. And to anybody who gets a chance to visit and look at and see what they're doing, it's truly remarkable and exciting. And I really love that. So That's great news. And the last question I have, and it's kind of like I really liked how you told us what you believe the takeaway is for slide number 15, looking at the EAV and tax rates. And, I really appreciated that. I think also your perspective on the takeaway for slide number 14, because we see it so often. I think that could be helpful for our community to hear, like what is our takeaway from this data?
Yeah, I think the first piece is when we talk about why these are 8 comparable districts, right? Because there's nothing comparable, based on this data. So I mean, these are our 8 comparable districts because these are 8 high-performing unit school districts, and we are a high-performing unit school district. So that's why these are our comparable districts. They're not our comparable districts because we have a similar amount of resources or because we spend about the same per pupil. So I think that's the first takeaway. The second piece, why we don't have some of the resources that these other districts do, it really does come down to that reliance on property taxes, and ties into that second slide about having some of the lowest EAV per pupil or the lowest property values per pupil compared to these 8 districts. And again, that ties with our discussion we had a lot in May about the state has made a commitment, at least they say they've made a commitment to increase their portion of funding for education to try and reduce that reliance on property taxes, but that commitment hasn't impacted this data for us in our comparable districts yet.
Yep. Thank you so much.
If I may, I just want to go back to Ms. James' question. While she was talking, I was pulling up the census data for you. We're getting our funding based upon the data that was pulled from 2021. And they are saying that out of a total population of 134,000 in the area of DuPage that serves us, there are relevant ages 5 to 17 in families in poverty, 1,318. Okay. Compared to last year, when our funding was only about 800,000, 1,081. So you see the jump. But as far back as 2017, it was 1,205. So it is much higher. Again, we assume it will increase because from 2019, it was going from 3.9%, the ratio was 3.9 to last year 4.1, and now this year 4.9. So let's just assume it's going to continue to go up.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mr. Karubis.
Your presentations are just getting better and better every time. This is a good one. On the slide 8, you were talking about how Lance Fuhrer has really been excited about what's happening, but I'm hearing about the excitement generally in the community. The students aren't in the buildings right now, but they drive by and they see the playgrounds getting changed. And so they're seeing the improvements from the outside. Maybe not into the STEM labs yet, but anytime you see, your neighbor putting on a new roof, that generates excitement, that shows people investing in the community, trying to improve it. So I've heard from teachers, they didn't take drone videos of it when they were getting new carpeting after like 25 years. And so, there's a lot of excitement on these investments because they've been deferred for so long for so much. So I think it's important that the community sees we're making an investment in our buildings because we are making that investment. I think that's important for them to see. But you're also telling the story is that we're doing it within our limitations. If we had an extra $4,000 per student, the investment in our buildings would be different. So that's a good story to tell, and I think you've told it well. We are looking forward to the facilities assessment report. And we talked about our kind of curriculum review calendar. Are we doing a report on the instructional comparable facilities assessment report that would fall into the instructional realm?
Yeah, our expectation, our plan is that our facilities assessment is going to be very comprehensive. So it will not just be asphalt and roofs. It will be really looking at those learning environments. I could talk through a little bit of the process now that we've used, and again, we're working with architecture firm White and Company. They've worked with many of our comparable districts. Several of the comparable districts we showed there. Has been to engage directly with our teachers and directly with our building staff, talk about those learning environments. We've taken tours of similar facilities, similar districts to us, to sort of get ideas for what we would like to see in our building. And again, that's not a tour to look at boilers and roofs and things like that. That's to look at classrooms, to look at furniture, to look at instructional materials, to look at having 21st century whiteboards that have storage behind them so that teachers have adequate space to store their things, but also have the displays there. That's to look at, how do we increase the functionality of the classroom? How do we allow for different learning modalities within the same lesson? How do we make that classroom as flexible as possible? That's been working with our technology team as well. They've been kind of taking a parallel path, looking at the technology needs related to the buildings and our classrooms, so that'll be incorporated that as well. So, yeah, I think there will be some significant dollars, obviously, associated with some of these deferred maintenance needs or other sort of building infrastructure mechanical needs. But I think the most exciting part of it, the project thus far has been, how is this really going to touch the classroom and the day-to-day learning environments for our students?
Thank you.
Ms. Jentz?
Thank you. I personally think your presentations are always great, but I don't have any questions right now, so I'm going to go nice and easy on you, Matt. But I am very much looking forward to the September and November meetings, just to go into a deeper dive of what's being looked at, which schools are prioritized with what. And so for now, I have no questions.
Okay, Ms. Bosdick?
Thank you for this. I want to say first, as a taxpayer, it feels so good to see an efficient, thoughtful, responsible budget. It makes me feel like when I go to the grocery store with my list and I've checked everything off, I did it within my budget, feel really good about it. That's what's happening in our district. And because of all of the work that you guys are doing, with the resources we have, right? That's what we have. I also had, not to beat a dead horse here, but I did have a parent say to me at the beginning of the summer, why do you guys always show that stat in meetings where we spend less than everybody else? That's not something to be proud of. So I had to take a minute to say, actually, it is. It's a statement of fact. We don't have as many resources as many of our other comparable districts, but we still are one of the high-performing districts. But also, look how much more we could do. So thank you for showing that we are being so responsible with this taxpayer money. We're being good guardians of that. And we're providing so much good with what we have, and we're doing it to the max, right? We're maxing out every one of those taxpayer dollars for our students and our families. So I finally, a couple of years in, I'm really gotten to the point where I'm like, I enjoy the buzzer presentation. I know what's going on. It takes a long time to really understand it, but I'm finally there. I feel good about it. Yes.
Well, and again, normally I'm presenting at like 10 p.m. So part
That's
of your
true.
excitement
That is-
may be that we.
That might have something to do with it too. I don't know.
that you're-
But yes, thank you.
Okay, so thank you. I found this presentation very entertaining too. I was very happy about the things people have pointed out. Ms. Jane, the Title I increase in money is significant because we were very upset before when that dropped. And that we're allocating resources once again as a priority to Title I schools. So that's something that continues to be an important topic for all of us. The STEM in Alla Elementary, as an engineer, I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to see that happening. We have the concrete at Nequa. I'm one that drives down that road a lot, so I'm watching. I actually had my husband and I went and drove on it the other day when it was finally okay to drive. So it was like, I was there a couple years ago, and I remember it was before Lance was principal, and I couldn't believe what shape this concrete was in. It was definitely a trip hazard, and when I spoke to at the time the principal there, or maybe it was Lance, I don't know, he said, I get to replace 9 squares a year of concrete. And I'm like, this thing needs to be trashed, okay? But as Mr. Krubis pointed out too, we have our schools who have original carpeting in them from 25 years ago. I mean, I can't even imagine what has gone on that carpet in 25 years. So it's like, we have been very, very cautious and careful with our resources, and some of this is just absolutely at the end of life, like it needs to be upgraded and changed. We've deferred our maintenance for many, many years, and we have made the very conscious decision in the last couple to say we have to do something about some of these projects. So I'm very, very happy and thrilled. I'm thrilled for all the elementary schools too, who are getting their new playgrounds, and eventually all of them will have upgraded playgrounds. So that's great. And the November 6th presentation is something that we all are anxious and really looking for to see what kinds of things you've seen at other districts and what will continue to make us the premier district in the state and in the country, actually, for taking us to the next level of excellence and availability for all of our students. So it's like we're excited to see that, but we will continue to always be careful stewards of the financial resources that we have in our district. So, and I was very happy even walking in today to see the new landscaping around the building, because it's just, when you walk in and it's just all scrubby looking and everything, I don't know, there's a vibe there that needs to be improved. So, but that's it. I don't really have any questions, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right. Our next topic is legislative advocacy and Board of Education update. Any comments there for that? I will point out in our consent agenda today, we did approve our board goals for the year. So it might not be obvious to the community unless they actually look through all of those details, but those will be posted on the website as our new board goals for this coming year. And other than that, I have no other news, so I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? We want to stay in
Second.
session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.